I know that it is tempting to say, hey, it was just the president, not the Ayatollah, so none of this matters. But that is oversimplifying things. It matters for here, and here, and here, back to here, obviously, and here, and here, and even here. Oh, and it also matters for this. Let's dive in. On May 19th, 2024, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi took a trip to his country's border with Azerbaijan. It was an important visit to inaugurate a dam and hydroelectric plant built along the country's river border. And it was not too long ago that there were concerns about a war between the two, with Azerbaijan trying to strengthen relations with Israel, and Iran having strong feelings about Azerbaijan's border with Armenia. In fact, former Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, who will play a recurring role in today's story, once described any changes to that border as a red line for Iran. Of course, the peacekeeping forces in that region were Russian, and it turns out that the Kremlin was distracted elsewhere in the world. Long story short, Azerbaijan made its move, and Iran's red line turned out to be a bluff. Anyway, everything seemed to be back on track with Iran's relations with Azerbaijan, and the trip itself was going normally enough, with Azerbaijan's Office of the President publishing these standard press release photos. But with the event concluded, it was time for Iran's president to head home, and that's when the trouble began. Returning to Iran aboard a Bell 212 helicopter like this one, it appears that the pilot struggled to navigate through a thick fog, and, unable to see in front of him, he ultimately crashed the chopper in East Azerbaijan, not far from the dam site. Quick, confusing geographical note. This is Azerbaijan, and this is also Azerbaijan, even though the two parts are disconnected due to Armenia being in the middle. East Azerbaijan is a province in Iran, and it is south of the country of Azerbaijan, even though its name would suggest that it should be over here. Anyway, the point is that the crash occurred in Iran, and due to a thick fog, it took about a half a day for rescuers to locate the crash site and declare that Raisi had died. In the immediate aftermath, the question turned to whether foul play was involved. Political scientists find such operations particularly concerning, because the absence of obvious attribution makes it impossible to sustain a situation where no one wants to take the opportunity that is in front of them. Here, if so many countries do not like Iran at the moment, someone will be tempted to commit a sabotage operation, given the default suspicion might fall elsewhere. But that ironically makes the likelier suspects tempted to attack, because there is no guarantee that it will trace back to them. And we know from some recent attacks on Iranian targets that this can lead to some more serious escalation concerns, even if a true powder keg has not yet exploded. However, the prevailing theory at the moment is that this is just a case of bad piloting. If the Kobe Bryant crash from 2020 taught the public anything, it is that helicopters and fog do not mix. Now, I realize that this argument is a bit circular, but for the sake of world peace, it is fortunate that the crash happened in bad weather conditions, and not under clear blue skies. So, as interesting as the logic of deterrence with imperfect attribution is, it will have to wait for another day. There is, of course, always the possibility that Iran uses the potential for sabotage to create a crisis that was not actually happening. After all, Iran's population would have a difficult time knowing for a fact that the accident was truly due to pilot error. The endgame intent there would be to create a rally round the flag effect and build support for some type of offensive. Indeed, it was not that long ago that Iran was in the middle of a back and forth with Israel, though it seemed at the time that Iran was actively looking for a way to end the turmoil, not escalate further. Still, the accident plausibly traces back to political decisions in the West. The Bell 212 was produced in Texas and Quebec. I say was because production ended in 1999. What this means is that Iran was operating antiquated Western equipment without simple access to Western markets for replacement parts. Enter Mohammad Javad Zarif once more, best known in the West for his role in negotiating the Iran deal almost a decade ago. He said in response to the crash that one of the main culprits of the tragedy is the United States, which embargoed the sale of aircraft and aviation parts to Iran. It is worth making a mental bookmark here, as the same sorts of sanctions are placed against Russia at the moment, and Russia also continues to operate Western aircraft. Those planes have not had any serious problems as of yet, but they are a bunch of ticking time bombs. Now, it would be easy to dismiss Raisi's death as politically irrelevant for the country of Iran. After all, Iran is an autocracy, and the real political power lies in the hands of the Ayatollah. Then again, that perhaps overstates the relationship. It might help to think of the president as sometimes setting Iran's agenda, deciding whom to meet with and whom not to, with the Ayatollah exercising final veto power. Nevertheless, the crash raises both long-term and short-term political power problems within the Islamic Republic. In the long run, Raisi was a consensus likely successor to Ayatollah Khamenei, and indeed, Khamenei himself took the president to Ayatollah path. Now, I say consensus likely successor, because we are basically back to doing Kremlinology here, and I just got done talking about how ridiculous that is. Put differently, no one really knows. But either way, that future path has been permanently blocked off. And long run might be a bit misleading here too. Quick survey of world leaders. For all that everyone makes about Putin's age, or Trump's age, or Biden's age, Khamenei has them all beat at 85 years young. In fact, to give you a better sense of the situation, he was born before Germany invaded Poland. Meanwhile, the short run may bring about even greater changes. According to Iran's constitution, Iran's first vice president becomes acting president once the Ayatollah gives his consent, which he already has done. The successor's politics appear roughly similar to his predecessors, and he comes pre-sanctioned by Western leaders, so that is not the important story here. Instead, the government has 50 days to run another election to fill the position properly. And again, it would be easy to dismiss the election of a somewhat powerless president who is caught up in an autocratic system. But that is an oversimplification for two reasons. First, we have discussed at length in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war how election days are frightening times for autocrats. If popular sentiment turns too far against the regime, the festive nature of Election Day itself turns into a rallying call for coordinated protests. And unless you can get out in front of them, large protests can in turn result in the fall of a government. Indeed, the disputed results of the 2009 Iranian presidential election led to just such protests across the country, though the regime endured. Second, we have also discussed before how autocratic leaders can use elections as trial balloons. If the Ayatollah wants to experiment with a risky policy, he permits candidates with different perspectives to make it to the final ballot, and allows the winner to try out that policy. The most recent iteration of this was the 2013 election of Hassan Rouhani, and his subsequent re-engagement with the West. That turned into the Iran deal, and with it, the final appearance for today of lead negotiator, Foreign Minister Zarif. Nevertheless, this plan failed from Iran's perspective when Trump became president and tore up the agreement in fulfillment of his campaign promises. The Rouhani approach subsequently fell out of favor in Tehran, and the pendulum swung back the other way with the 2021 election of Raisi. Raisi was a hardliner, known by his detractors as the Butcher of Tehran, for his role in the 1988 execution of thousands of political prisoners on the order of Ayatollah Khomeini. His time in office saw a strengthening of Iran's axis of resistance against the West, and Western-aligned parties in the region, with alleged increased proxy support to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Syrian government, and the Houthis, as a part of Iran's broader conflict with Israel and Saudi Arabia. Never mind that Iran is perennially on the verge of building its first nuclear weapon. Forget Mossad. You would be forgiven to think that Amazon was responsible for the whole situation. Aside from that, Iran has also played a key role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, supplying a large number of Shahed drones for Russian use on targets deep inside the country. The impending election will therefore be a surprise referendum on these policies, and autocracies do not like surprises. Of the contentious policies, Russian military assistance is the least likely to change. It brings in a ton of money and is part of what funds the rest of Iran's operations. Plus, the Kremlin took a proactive approach here, first posting condolences Monday morning on the official Kremlin website, and followed up by a phone call to Iran's acting president. That said, a step back from any segment of the axis of resistance is not likely either. The only way that might arise is if turnout and vote numbers break so heavily against the status quo policy that the government feels that it is necessary to calm domestic tensions. Still, there may be some fleeting benefits for the West there. Security forces in Iran can only do so much at once. And yes, there is some division between those overseeing the situation at home and those overseeing the situation abroad. But the short-run demand for security at home will take away some level of that focus abroad. The question is whether any of Iran's regional rivals can do anything of note with that window of opportunity. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility there is the first steps of a grand bargain among the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. The State Department was already spending much of its bandwidth on that project, with multiple visits to the key players in question. But Israel's offensive into Rafah as a part of the Gaza war will remain a major stumbling block there. Though the Israeli domestic politics on the entire situation is about to reach a boiling point, and any serious movement may have to wait for a new prime minister. Suffice it to say that the gods of international relations chose an interesting time for a helicopter to crash. And, as usual for these sorts of breakpoints, there is a high probability that not much happens, and a low probability that a whole ton of stuff happens, with not much room in the middle for an average outcome. If you want to know more about the broader conflict in the Middle East, check out this playlist I have dedicated to the subject. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.